Who is Jerome Ford? Well, he is about to be the most added player in CBS Sports fantasy leagues and really fantasy leagues everywhere. He's 23% rostered, had a 69-yard run that was almost a touchdown last night, a fifth-round pick in 2022, and about to be a feature back, we hope, for the Cleveland Browns. But it's hard for me to be super excited right now. It was really a bummer of a fantasy night last night. Not only did we have two kind of sloppy defensive games, but of course, Nick Chubb out for the season, a guy who's been a top 12 running back per game in full PPR and even better in the other formats in 4 straight seasons. But good morning, everybody. Let's get your waiver wire for week 3 here. Let's help you win your league and move forward. Injuries happen, unfortunately, but Jamie was I don't know, man. Want to reflect on this Chubb situation? This really was such a heartbreaker.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, anytime you see a guy like that, especially at this point in his career, this could, I hope it's not career ending, but you never know depending on the severity of what the damage is. But yeah, definitely out for the season. And, we have now just a really frustrating start to the year. I mean, you think about the first round running backs or borderline first round running backs that have already had to miss time when you have,
Barkley,
Jonathan Taylor and Barkley and,
Eckler
and to extend it, Aaron Jones, J.K. Dobbins, now Jamal Williams and David Montgomery, and so but clearly Chubb's injury is the most devastating one. And in terms of Jerome Ford, he probably, if he didn't run out of gas, he would have stayed on the drive and scored the touchdown in the third quarter. It went to Pierre Strong. But you mentioned it, do they add somebody else? Do they have a reunion with Kareem Hunt? Do they bring in a Leonard Fournette? Darrell Henderson's a guy that's been making the rounds of tryouts. That would be I think a saving grace if it's somebody like that. But do they make the trade? Do they make a trade to go be aggressive and get a Jonathan Taylor or a Cam Akers? So those are things you got to just keep an eye on as well. But I think if anything, whenever you get injuries like this, and you see a guy in the same game perform the way that Jerome Ford did, 130 total yards, work in the passing game, find the end zone, you're going to feel better about A, if you handcuff Chubb to have him already on your roster, or B, knowing that you're going to have to spend a significant amount of fab to go get him. And he should be able to at least start for you for as long as he remains a starter in Cleveland.
A super significant amount of fab on Jerome Ford. Jamie does a smart thing that I probably should have done in my commissioner leagues where I'm the commissioner, run waivers on Wednesday night instead of Tuesday night. Give the dust a little bit more time to settle. And I mean, we already know the injury with Chubb, but I would like to know a little bit more about what they plan to do in terms of depth, Dave. Mm-hmm. So, I'm going to ask you guys for your top 3 priorities. I know number 1 is going to be Jerome Ford. But how much fab are you willing to spend on Jerome Ford?
I'm going to spend a lot. I think it depends on whether or not you play with casuals and it's a small league, or if you play with sharp managers and it's a big league. I play with a lot of sharp people. You guys are included in there. I think I'll go as high as 70% to get him, because I don't know how many guys like this are actually out there who we'd load up to go and get. A lot of these players, a lot of these handcuff players that Jamie talked about, they're already rostered that we would go and spend north of 70% for. Now, if you're in one of those smaller leagues and there's casuals, it's 55%. You can go a little bit lower. I actually did a straw poll around our office here at CBS Sports HQ this morning. No one went higher than 45%.
What?
No, there were 2 people that went 15% because they're scared that the Browns are going to bring back Kareem Hunt, and that Kareem Hunt is going to magically turn into 2018 Kareem Hunt and just completely dominate and render Jerome Ford useless. The Browns have already told us over the last 6 months what they think of Kareem Hunt. I'd be surprised if they brought him back, to be completely honest with you. And Kevin Stefanski said that they've got the confidence in Jerome Ford moving forward. You know that he's fast. We know that he's a capable pass catcher. He's playing behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. I feel good about this. It's a risk because we could be wrong. We were wrong about Kenneth Gainwell last week. He was hurt, and we were making him a priority. Yeah, but eventually Gainwell will play. I think Jerome Ford is worth taking that risk on. And so my number is going to be 70%. I think you've got to unload the clip, so to speak.
Yeah, I came up with the same number on FFT and 5 last night. I want to throw out one more scenario to you guys, and we have to talk about other players. We will talk about Zach Moss, for example. We will talk about how much did you spend on Kareem Hunt. Maybe take a shot on that. We will talk about Josh Reynolds, et cetera, and quarterbacks. Here's a Twitter poll I did last night. Has almost 3,000 votes. How much of your original fab budget are you willing to spend on Jerome Ford? 90% or more, 70 to 89%, which is what Schaefer voted for. 50 to 69% or less than half. Less than half does have the most votes, but it's only 33%. So that means 2/3 are willing to spend at least half of their original budget. I mean, 22% say they spend 90% or more. So that's pretty wild, Jamie. I think I was in this, I'd be in probably the 70 to 89% range, but here's, you could tell me where you'd be in that, where how much would you spend of your original budget on Ford? But my second question is, I was talking to a friend this morning, and he said, how much should I spend on Ford? I just lost Chubb. How much should I spend on Ford? And he said, I'm thinking like $42 or something out of 100 original. And I said, no, you're going to need to go more like 70. And he said, well, I only have 61 left or something. I said, well, then, you know what? I think I'd rather have no Ford and Fab than Ford and no fab. I don't know that I want to have zero fab left. So we need to talk about that angle of it too, is like, do you set yourself up for disaster? It is week 3 and you spend almost all or all of your fab by week 3, but so that's a 2-part question, Jamie. I'm sorry for rambling. How much would you spend on Ford? What's your answer? And then let's talk about that prospect of emptying your fab this early in the season for someone.
Yeah, I think, Dave sort of alluded to this. You have to know your league and you have to know your situation clearly, so if you are in a league that is going to be very aggressive with free agent bids early in the season, then you probably should spend whatever you have left or close to what you have left, because you don't know how many of these guys are going to become available throughout the course of the season, so I don't want to put anything out there of jinxing players, but we have some handcuffs that are still out there for certain players that you might want to go get just in case these injuries do occur again. But this is a guy that's rostered. I think his roster percentage from the time I wrote it was 23%. Now it's up to 25%. So people that were able to make moves last night have already done so. But like your friend was alluding to, we may get another scenario like this in week 5 or week 7 or week 10, and I don't know if it'll be better, but it could be similar. And so if you don't need Jerome Ford, you're not going to spend that much to go get him. But if you do need him and you're 0-2, and this is the type of player that could save you for a few weeks, then what are you going to save your fab for? So it just comes down to, what your situation is. And so the way that I wrote it in the story was 50%, if not more, so you got to be prepared to spend a lot of your fab. You got to be prepared that this might be the player that could help you win several weeks. And if you can get a player that's going to help you win several weeks, forget about the season. Can he get you through the next month? And I think he can. It's a tough matchup against Tennessee, but with again all the running backs that I told you that are potentially missing for week 3, he's top 15. I don't know where you ranked him, Dave, but he's top 15 for me. And if this was Nick Chubb, he would be top 10. But if this was any other matchup, he would probably be, in terms of Jerome Ford, top 10. Because again, the scenario is that good based on how they run the ball, based on that they'll use him in the passing game. And if they are bringing in somebody, even if it's Kareem Hunt at this point, they're not bringing in somebody to start over him for this week. So for at least 1 week, you're getting a potential bell cow, and that's hard to overlook.
It is very hard to overlook. Now, you're thinking, I think if you look at the possible handcuffs out there, I don't know that it's going to get much better than this. There is a history of Nick Chubb missing time in 2020 and 2021. And I think there were 6 games total. We were talking about no splits really in the backfield. We were talking about either Kareem Hunt getting mostly all the work, or Dearness Johnson. I think it may have been 7 games. Dearness Johnson having 2 huge games. Remember that Thursday night game where both Hunt and Chubb were out. So they weren't really splitting it. I know people are worried about the Kareem Hunt thing, but Dave already talked about that.
It's not the Kareem Hunt thing for me. It's the Taylor Akers thing for me.
Okay.
Do they look at their team and say, okay, we're 1-1. We basically gave away a game last night because of turnovers. We lost our best player. And is this our window right now? Because I would say they have a championship caliber defense. I don't know if they're the best in the league, but they're going to be in the upper half. And they paid their quarterback to be that type of guy. So does bringing in, I don't know. I mean, look, again, this could be career ending for Nick Chubb. So do they bring in a Jonathan Taylor to sort of, that's the next guy? Do they go get a Cam Akers as a bridge, until they figure out their answer, or to help out Jerome Ford? I think Kevin Stefanski, as Dave alluded to, they feel comfortable with him. They probably would have made a move to bring in somebody else already at this point if they weren't comfortable with him, knowing what the depth of this backfield looks like. So it probably does not speak to that they're going to add somebody of significance. But you just have to factor that in. You really just have to factor that in, that they could go any which way at this point. So you would hope, as a Jerome Ford fantasy manager right now, or somebody that's going to get him first on waivers, most fab in your league, that you're guaranteed to get him, that it is a Kareem Hunt, that it is a Leonard Fournette, that it is one of these retread guys. The worst case scenario, again, is they go out and make a trade for somebody. And look, they could call Jacksonville and say, hey, we'll take Dearness Johnson back. And that's somebody that's familiar with their system. They could do something like that too, which would be, I think, a little bit of a downgrade to Jerome Ford. But he's in such a great spot right now. It's the investment is going to pay off as long as he stays healthy. And again, nothing else of significance is brought in.
This team they traded so much for Watson, and they don't even have a first round pick in 2024. So keep that in mind. They'd be giving up a lot, really, like to get Jonathan Taylor. I'm not saying they'd have to give up a first round pick, but they just don't have capital necessarily, like early round capital.
Again, taking a broad picture Cleveland view of this, you do what the Rams did, and you mortgage the future to try and compete now.
You could do that. I don't think they need to rush into it, though. The trade deadline isn't until after week 8. I'm sure the Colts are going to take offers on Taylor if Taylor's still getting offers at this point. They'll take him. They'll take offers all the way through week 4 before they have to take him off the PUP list. They could wait a week and see what they've got with Ford and Strong, and then decide what direction to move in. And even if they miss out on Cam Akers in a trade, there's still going to be another running back somewhere else in the league. Someone as minor as Dearness Johnson, someone as huge as Jonathan Taylor, although I'd be shocked if they traded for Jonathan Taylor, because that means that they would have to pay Jonathan Taylor potentially. I think the Browns can wait a little bit, and I think they can see what they've got in Ford and Strong first.
All right. I have one more question about Jerome Ford. If you were going to make a short list of the worst run defenses to face for a fantasy running back, you'd put Tennessee, Baltimore, and San Francisco on that list. You probably put the Eagles on that list at this point now. But Tennessee, Baltimore, and San Francisco are the first 3 matchups for Jerome Ford. Yep. So welcome to the big leagues. Tennessee this week, then Baltimore, then a bye, and then San Francisco. So that sucks on paper. How should that factor into your, I'm not even going to pretend for 1 second that he shouldn't be the number 1 waiver claim. That's an easy conversation. But how should that schedule factor into your fab decision for Jerome Ford?
It shouldn't, because you're taking a long-term approach with this, that if he is the guy for Cleveland, that he'll still be productive in those matchups, not superstar in those matchups, because Nick Chubb would be a superstar in those matchups regardless, to whatever degree you want to rank him in that regard. I want to have the starting running back for the Browns on my team.
Playing devil's advocate here, let's say he's the starter for those 3 games. There's a bye mixed in there as well. And the Browns decide, you know what, he's not effective against these defenses. Let's go and get somebody else. And so by the time they get to week 7, it's the Colts and then the Seahawks and then the Cardinals. Those are the next 3 games after that murderer's row that Adam brought up. Will it still be Jerome Ford? Could he still be that guy? Now, again, I said I'm playing devil's advocate, because I think as long as they don't make a significant move, it's going to be Jerome Ford. Right. So that's why I'm not going higher than 70%. And it's also why I'm looking forward to talking about what's through the other door. Fantasy managers don't, if you lost Chubb, if you lost Dobbins, and you're in real need for a running back, this isn't your only option for this week and moving forward. There's another way to go here.
Segue alert. All right. So other than Jerome Ford, who are your top priorities? Let's say top 3 priorities on the waiver wire this week. Dave, you can start.
Zach Moss is going to be number 1 after that. And he should be able to get you through at least 2 more weeks. And there is a path if the Colts trade Jonathan Taylor, or if Jonathan Taylor plays hardball and sits out after being activated from the PUP list, which is a possibility, where Moss can be a starter for your fantasy team for the next, I didn't actually count the weeks, so I apologize. I can do it in a second. Let's call it 6 weeks. And so that's somebody who can get you by for the next several weeks, and you don't have to spend a ton of fab to get him. I would say 20%, 25% might be able to get Zach Moss. And that's a lot for a guy that might only give you 2 weeks. But I think that he's clearly the feature back in Indianapolis. After that, it's just more piecemeal running backs. Justice Hill is 41% available. He would be next up for me, especially if I needed a running back. And then that's when I would get into some other positions. Traylon Burks, Hunter Henry would come after that. I'm not interested in the Giants guys very much. I'm definitely not interested in Tony Jones. And then we can talk about other potential handcuff running
Reynolds.
backs.
About Reynolds, where does he factor in here?
He's up there. He's definitely up there. He's right in the top 6.
Okay.
But the top 3, if you're interested, all running backs: Ford, Moss, Justice Hill.
Okay, Jamie, how about you? Top 3 other than Ford?
It would be Moss, then Breida, then Justice Hill.
I just, I brought this up last night, but it was actually Gary Brightwell who had more carries than Breida. There were 2 games last year that Barkley either missed or got hurt or barely played in the Eagles game, both Eagles games actually. And Brightwell had more carries, which just kind of made me feel like I don't really want anything to do with this, especially Thursday against San Francisco. I don't think we're going to feel comfortable there. Now, week 4 against Seattle might be a different story. Barkley could be back against the Dolphins in week 5. Could. I have a lot to say about that because Barkley, that looked like a bad ankle injury, and he's had 2 ankle injuries in his career, and he has struggled coming back from both of them. I mean, he was just not very good after returning from both of those ankle injuries. I don't know if one has anything to do with the other, but anyway, I mean, what do you think about that whole Gary Brightwell thing? Because I was originally just like, oh yeah, Breida, not a bad ad, like flexy, but that Brightwell thing from last year, I don't know if it carries over, no idea, but I want to get your thoughts on that.
It's definitely something to think about whenever you get these backup guys in there. Is it, unless it's a 1-for-1, Ford stepping in for Chubb, and like I said, whenever you see that and you see the way that you perform, it just puts your mind at ease. Like, you shouldn't be aggressive really with any of these guys aside from Ford and Moss, just because of what the situation is. I mean, Zach Moss played 98% of the snaps. That's crazy that how much they leaned on him in his first game back. So you have easy scenarios here. Like Craig Reynolds, is it going to be him just stepping into Montgomery's role, or are they actually going to put more on Jahmyr Gibbs' plate? Is it going to be, Tony Jones getting all the work against the Packers? So for 1 week, you might have a guy that could start for you, because we know Green Bay's run defense has been really iffy. So that's something to keep in mind too. It could be Kendre Miller, it could be Taysom Hill, but he played 51% of the snaps last night against the Panthers, and he scored 2 touchdowns. So in terms of Tony Jones, so it's 1 week versus 3 weeks versus long term. That's how you just have to sort of catch it. And I think for what you're looking at, just depends on what your team is and how much, again, fab you want to invest. So if you don't need Jerome Ford, I can't imagine anybody wouldn't want to have him. But if you don't want to spend, like your friend, the rest of your fab on him, there are some guys that might be able to sort of get you through the next several weeks as you sort of navigate the rough waters of the running back position.
And you'll save a lot of fab doing it. You just won't have a guy who could potentially let you, put your feet up and say, I don't have to worry about this spot anymore. I've got Jerome Ford, which, would have sounded silly a month ago, but there's a legit possibility. Jamie, you can disagree with me. There's a legit possibility he's an RB2 the rest of the season.
Who, Ford?
Yeah.
I think he's
a definite RB2 the rest of the season if he stays in this role.
Yeah, I was talking about it with Chris last night. You think about the running back situation right now. I think there's a legit possibility he's an RB1.
Yes.
It's out there.
I hate these first 3 games because it reminds me a little bit. It doesn't really, because there's no competition right now. But if you remember the year, like 4 or 5 years ago, Aaron Jones was suspended for the first 2 games, and Jamal Williams had 2 really brutal matchups to start the year, and he stunk. And Aaron Jones came back from suspension, and just, I feel like he just took over. And I just hate these first 3 matchups, but there's no competition there. There's no and we saw like Kyron Williams, not like he was so good against the 49ers, but he got every touch. He scored 3 touchdowns. So yeah, you go for it with Ford.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is, you're going to get some situations where there might be some players dropped for Jerome Ford. And one that comes to mind for me this week is Josh Kelly, because he was bad against the Titans. And you may get Eckler's returning, and we just don't know. And it's a much better matchup for Kelly this week against Minnesota.
Right.
And if he's the guy there, again, you're just trying to get from week to week. So keep an eye on some of the players that are being dropped. I got a few questions last night. Oh, I got my roster, my bench is tight. I'm going to drop Raheem Mostert for Jerome
Ooh,
Ford.
yikes.
And you should, if your bench is tight and your roster's tight.
Can't
But
you
then the
trade
next
him
person-
first, though? Couldn't
The
you
next
try and
person
trade
in
him
your
first?
league should go pick up Raheem Mostert. These 10, 18 leagues, people have some tough calls to make. You're going to get people. I got, a few of these last night, I think, as the game was unfolding. Jalen Warren or Roshan Johnson to drop for
Yes.
Jerome Ford. Again, you're doing that.
Yes.
But then the other person should go pick up in your league. The other people in your league should go be looking to pick up Roshan Johnson and Jalen Warren. So there are going to be some players that get dropped in some of these shallower leagues that will be helpful to you. Just keep an eye on it. And then, again, I don't want to put this out there, but some of the other handcuffs that you should be looking at to be aggressive with: Tyjae Spears, that's a 1-for-1. Ty Chandler, we could see Alexander Madison falling out of favor. Hope not, but that's a situation there. Sean Tucker in Tampa Bay, another 1-for-1. Doesn't play the same role, but will maybe do a little bit different things in the run game. Not as attractive, but Keontae Ingram. And then again, just looking at situation, Rico Dowdle, just based on what I think he'll be able to do if he is the guy there in Dallas. But again, you're looking at the Dallas running back, so these are guys that you should be putting on the end of your bench. Adam and I were talking about this last night. We were texting about this. Like you got upset with me jokingly that I picked up Jerome Ford going into the weekend, but I did that in almost every league. And I told you, I said in the league that I share with my 11-year-old, we were talking about it, and I said, do you want this guy, or this guy? And we chose Tyjae Spears over Jerome Ford. And obviously regret that move, but that's the type of moves that you should be doing. If you have a bench spot that just is not being used for you, these are the type of how many times have you heard me say this phrase? Lottery tickets. These are the lottery tickets that will help you win your leagues. And it happens every year. You don't always hit on them, but if you do in this case situation, you're going to maybe win your fantasy league. It sucks because you'd rather have Nick Chubb out there, but this is now the opportunity for Jerome Ford to help you and help the Browns.
All right, we got to take a break here. Well, let me tell you, though, before we do that, we have a live stream on Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We have a live stream on Sunday morning, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We have a live stream on Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. So join us those 3 nights or morning, Monday night, Thursday night, Sunday morning, to help you set your lineups, answer any of your questions. It's all at youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. Join our Facebook group. Just search for Fantasy Football Today on Facebook. And sit tight. We have a lot more to get to. Did you know that Jalen Waddle is in the concussion protocol? That that one snuck up on us. That Brandon Ayuk might not play this week. So we've got a lot of injuries. And we got a busy show today. And there were those 2 stinkers last night. I'm not even sure if we'll have time to talk about that. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
Saturday, doubleheader action on CBS. Ole Miss takes on the Tide in Alabama. Then a primetime whiteout as Iowa faces Penn State. Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so Nick Chubb out for the year. Barkley, the timetable is about 3 weeks with an ankle sprain. San Francisco on Thursday, then Seattle, then Miami for the Giants in the next 3 weeks. David Montgomery said he's going to need about 2 weeks to heal from his thigh bruise, but his coach, Dan Campbell, said he's in the day-to-day category or something like that. I'm going to guess that you're not expecting Montgomery this week.
No.
Not this week, though. But again, this is why you got to be a little bit cautious with Reynolds. What if it's not week to week, if it's just 1 week?
Jamal Williams left with a hamstring injury, and Kamara will be back in week 4. They're at Green Bay this week. Cam Akers seems likely to get traded. So some players, some wide receivers to watch for their availability for this week. DK Metcalf, he did come back, but he's dealing with this ribs injury. Jalen Waddle, concussion protocol. Brandon Ayuk, shoulder injury. Devontae Adams apparently is good. I don't know. Does that mean he cleared the concussion protocol? I don't know.
No, I don't know if he has or not, but the coach said that he's doing okay. So could be one of those situations where he's in the concussion protocol and he'll clear it in time for the game. We're ranking him this week.
It's one of the stupidest things that I've seen. They're down 18. They pull Josh Jacobs. They take a shot down the field for Devontae Adams. That has no bearing on the outcome. There's
Triple
no way
coverage, by the way. Triple coverage.
And he just gets blasted.
What else? And his teammate, Jacoby Myers, is trending in the right direction, trying to come back from his concussion. Zay Jones, we don't know about his status. He's got a knee injury. Darnell Mooney thinks he'll be okay with his knee. Odell Beckham's ankle injury is apparently not serious. And Deontay Johnson is on IR. and he's got to miss the next 4 games. I mean, they didn't even put him on IR. So that,
Well, 3 now.
oh, really? Because I thought,
No, week 2 counts toward his IR.
okay, good.
That's why they did it when they did it.
All right.
He'll come back after the
Okay,
bye in
missed
week
that.
7.
Okay.
And that's why whenever that situation happens, you do what I did, which apparently caused somebody to get upset in the podcast.
What?
I had Deontay Johnson on the podcast roster. I did it in 2 leagues where it was eligible. You pick up somebody that's playing Monday night. I did it in 2 leagues where I could do it. Podcast league was one. I picked up Adam Thielen. Just he was playing. Who cares? You know.
Yeah, you take a shot. And you
Right.
probably keep him.
And you did it after he was IR eligible.
Right.
You did nothing wrong.
No, I'm not saying I did anything wrong, but it apparently caused some questions.
No. Someone just was wondering, why did you pick up Adam Thielen? Because he had such a bad game, but he ended up, in week 1. But then, quarterbacks. Anthony Richardson's got the concussion. Joe Burrow, we do not know what's going on here. We don't know. His status for week 3 is uncertain. And, he came back too soon, it seems. Jamar Chase sort of hinted to that. And
remember what Chase said initially?
Yeah.
5 weeks.
So, yeah, I mean, maybe a topic for Wednesday's show, but I don't think I want to, unless it's super low, I don't think I want to buy low on Jamar Chase right now.
Oh, I'd be buying low on Jamar Chase.
I'd be all over.
To what degree? I mean, like I said, I last week I offered Stephon Diggs for Chase, and it was
that's not really buying low though.
No, that's
now it's not for sure. But okay, you trade Puka Nacua for him
in a heartbeat.
Oh my God, yes.
Would you trade Calvin Ridley for him
in a heartbeat?
I don't know if I'd do that.
Okay, because that's kind of where I'm like, I don't know if I'd go do that.
Ridley straight up for him. Yeah, I probably would, but had to think about it for a few seconds there.
The frustrating thing about this, and just keep this in mind when you're making your waiver moves, they don't play until Monday. We're not going to get a practice report on them until Thursday. Until Thursday. So you may not know Joe Burrow's status. So just be prepared to get a quarterback.
Yeah. I just wrap on this, but we cannot rule out Joe Burrow going on IR, right?
Correct. That is technically in play.
I mean, it's technically in play for everyone, but it's not completely unlikely for Burrow. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's just vague right now.
I mean, we could say the exact same thing for anybody that got hurt in week 2, but didn't suffer, a terrible injury like Nick Chubb. We can't rule out that Saquon is going to go on IR, and the team doesn't have to make a decision until leading up to the game, just like the Steelers did.
Okay. Logan Thomas is an injured tight end. Oh, Lamar Jackson has a hand injury, but it does not seem to be a big deal. Is there any more fab you want to talk about? So Ford, we know, is a potential break the bank guy. And how about Zach Moss? What'd you say? 20?
Yeah, in that range.
How about Josh Reynolds? How much would you spend of your original budget?
10 to 15.
Yeah, 10 max.
Hunter Henry?
Same, 10 to 15.
Yeah, I'd go a little higher because it's a tight end.
All right, top 3 at each position. Let's get some names floating out there. Actually, let's do that. We'll do it, yeah. Top 3 at each position. Jamie, who are the top 3 quarterbacks to get this week who are rostered 65% of leagues or fewer?
So it's kind of I'm a little all over the place with that just because of the super flex and 2 QB league options. But Stafford, I think you got to buy into what he's doing. With the pass attempts, the touchdowns have not been there for him. But as long as he stays healthy, he looks like he may have a great receiving core if Cooper Kupp does return with the way that the other 2 guys are playing. And he's healthy right now. So he would be the first one to go look at. And I don't think a tremendously difficult matchup against the Bengals on Monday night, although it shouldn't be easy for him. But he's just got to get that second touchdown if he can get it. Gardner Minshew would be second just because you've seen enough of him in his career when he does play. And so if Anthony Richardson is out, I'd look at that in terms of a super flex or 2 QB option, maybe as a replacement for Joe Burrow this week. Sam Howell, I liked him in the preseason. He looked really good against the Broncos, and tough schedule coming up. But, you're seeing just a lot of options for him at play right now in terms of his receiving core. So he would be third. And then I'll put Baker Mayfield there. They're rostered in the same amount of leagues. Baker's balling, no turnovers in the first 2 games. Mike Evans is playing great. I know the matchup against Philly on paper should be bad. They just lost Avonte Maddox, so this could be a big opportunity for a guy like Chris Godwin, their slot corner, being out there. And so, Baker may have an opportunity to still be a decent option. But in terms of Howell and Mayfield, I'd love to know what the amount of leagues are super flex and 2 QB because they're only rostered in 35% of our leagues. So I'm going to guess that's the majority of those formats. But if you're in an 8 or 10 team super flex league or 2 QB league and those guys are not rostered, please go get them.
I don't think there are that many super flex leagues. But we could probably find that out. But yeah, all right. I don't know. This wasn't the most inspiring list of quarterbacks, to be
No,
honest.
because most of them are rostered,
Yeah.
So like, for example, in terms of Stafford and Howell, who are and at this point, really even Baker, like Derek Carr and Kenny Pickett are rostered in many more leagues than those guys.
Not for
I'd
long.
rather have Stafford and those two quarterbacks in particular on my bench if I'm just looking to stash a quarterback on my bench than those two.
Okay. Running backs, Dave.
And then I'm sorry, one more, just Jake Browning, just in case. I know we're not expecting him to be Joe Burrow, but he still has those weapons. And so, can he get you 18 points per game? That's not a horrible place to be if you're stuck.
Okay. I mean, this is basically the waiver wire segment, but I can't make the case because of the matchups. But Mac Jones, his next 2 matchups are the Jets. His next 3 matchups are horrible. Jets, Cowboys, Saints. So you can forget it. But there's some encouraging stuff out of New England, at least just their pace, the amount of times they're throwing, but forget it. All right, Dave, who are the top 3 running backs? It might be obvious, but go for it.
It's Jerome Ford, it's Zach Moss, and it's Justice Hill. Each of them is available in at least 40% of CBS Sports leagues, so they're out there. I don't know if there's really much else to say.
That's fine. Who are the top? Dave, I'll go back to you. Who are the top 3 wide receivers?
My top wide receiver is Treylon Burks because I'm thinking rest of season. He's available in 45% of leagues. Josh Reynolds is behind him. He's available in 79% of leagues. That's going to change. He's going to be rostered everywhere. Tutu Atwell would be behind him. That's my top 3. Burks, Reynolds, Atwell.
Burt Reynolds.
Burks, Reynolds.
Yes. So wait, let's talk about this Treylon Burks thing here. Why is this a rest of season player? You're just having some trouble trusting DeAndre Hopkins with the injury?
There's a little bit of that. And we saw what Burks could do on that deep throw from Tannehill. I thought Tannehill looked a lot better in week 2 than he did in week 1. And it's a long-term upside play. I think if you need a receiver in week 3 to start, I'd feel better about Reynolds than Burks. But I'm thinking the rest of the way, and I think Burks will have some big games.
Jamie, the top tight ends?
Hunter Henry, you mentioned, 2 touchdowns in the first 2 games, 13 targets, and, playing very well in this Bill O'Brien offense. And Mac Jones is clearly relying on him enough that you can trust him as a potential top 5 tight end, but certainly as a top 10 tight end for the foreseeable future. Jake Ferguson, again, we've talked about this for several weeks now, 7 targets in week 1. I'd love to see what this offense just as a whole will look like in a competitive game after beating their first 2 opponents out of New York, 70 to 10, excuse me. So I think Ferguson will have some.
What happened this week, Jamie?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right?
It's Arizona.
Not exactly the most appealing situation. And then look, give Zach Ertz some credit. 6 catches each of the first 2 games. More of a PPR play than anything else because he's not doing much with it. But you're seeing the targets there, and it's hard to overlook 18 targets in 2 weeks. So, as poorly as the Cardinals' offense is, Zach Ertz has become a go-to guy for Josh Dobbs.
Would you move Taysom Hill ahead of Ertz if it's a non-PPR league?
Oh yeah.
Ferguson too?
Probably so. Yeah, I mean, Taysom Hill is a borderline. Again, it depends on the platform you're using because a lot of leagues have moved him to quarterback only. So just keep that in mind. But for us as a tight end, yes, I think Taysom Hill, as long as they don't bring in somebody else, has top 12 upside in non-PPR.
And even when Kamara comes back, you're saying just for week
this is
for week 3. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about Hunter Henry because this is, it's impressive stuff. And like I said with Mac Jones, I mean, Hunter Henry has the same matchups: Jets, Cowboys, Saints. That the Jets, I don't know that the Jets and the Cowboys are so amazing against tight ends, but these are good defenses. The Saints are amazing against tight ends. But Henry, 61% rostered and 2 good games so far. But do we buy into it? I mean, how much are you guys buying it with Henry?
Oh, I'm buying it. I mean, it's not like this guy doesn't have a pedigree. He's been a pretty good fantasy tight end throughout his career when he's gotten opportunities and I'll say quality quarterback play. I don't know if this qualifies yet, but it's looking much better. The concern going into the year for me at least was, okay, this is a guy, Mike Gesicki, that Bill O'Brien has a history with and was someone that they, were moderately attracted to bring in as a quality playmaker for them. And you heard some good things in the offseason minicamp. Then he got hurt. But Henry's the better player. And, I think you're seeing it right now. So I don't have a problem chasing the first 2 weeks of production because of what this offense has done for tight ends, what Mac Jones, I think, will do for him. And look, you had one big week for Kendrick Bourne. You got a lot of targets in week 2 also. You don't get fantasy points for air yards, and he ran a lot of them. Devontae Parker, stepped up in week 2, but he didn't play in week 1. Juju's been a disappearing act for the majority of the first 2 games. So this has been a constant, so you're averaging 6.5 targets. You're getting 6 catches. You're getting, he's 10.5 PPR points without the touchdowns. So that's a good place to be right now.
Yeah. And, his touchdown shouldn't have counted, by the way, but we're not going to hold that against Hunter Henry.
Why not? Why not?
There was an ineligible man downfield. Collinsworth was like, there should have been 2 penalties on this play or something like that. But
nice Collinsworth impersonation.
Yeah, I thank you. They say I do a good Collinsworth. I'm going to do.
There you go.
All right, Dave, give me some DSTs. I'm Chris Collinsworth.
I would defer to Jamie. I'm not prepared for DSTs.
Jamie, give me some DSTs.
Oh my God, you sound like a farmer.
No, it's not a real impression.
The Chiefs are my favorite one just because we've seen Justin Fields look awful. Yeah. The Titans, again, just looking at how they will defend the run of Deshaun Watson looks awful. The Seahawks get the Panthers and that inept offense right now, and then the Dolphins against the Broncos, because I think Denver going on the road after 2 straight home games, Miami coming back for their first home game. I think the weather is going to be impactful here. It's going to be hot and muggy. So Denver could struggle. Russell Wilson could struggle. And I wasn't impressed with the way the Broncos looked in the second half of that game.
Kickers, Jamie?
Brandon Aubrey should be rostered regardless of matchup at this point.
Yeah.
He's 50% on our site. Dustin Hopkins, I think that'll be a field goal game for the Browns. Brandon McManus against Houston, and then Jason Saunders against the Broncos.
Can I ask about a couple of DSTs and where you've got them, Jamie?
Sure.
The Titans and the Raiders.
Titans are top 12. Raiders are just outside that, so they're in the top 15, but I like the other 4 better.
I love those teams this week because the Titans are taking on the Browns. Raiders are taking on the Steelers. They just beat the hell out of each other on Monday night. And those 2 teams should be fresh and ready to go in week 3.
I think it depends on your scoring too, because as we saw last night, the Steelers defense could look awful and still create some turnovers and score touchdowns, and that could ruin your point total on the other side.
Oh, right. If you lose points for DSTs, do it.
The Browns had over 400 yards total offense, so it wasn't like the Steelers defense was great.
It's been a while since the Steelers have had that.
Jason Sanders, right? You said both there. I'm sure it's Sanders.
Jason Sanders.
Yeah, Sanders. All right, Dave, who's our IDP?
Let's start at defensive line, and Harrison Phillips, who's had a lot of tackle volume over the first 2 weeks of the season for Minnesota. I'd buy into that on the D-line. At DB, Dax Hill has been playing great over the first 2 weeks of the season. Double-digit fantasy points if tackles count. 2 DBs that are hurt right now. It looks like Amani Hooker's got a chance to play. He was really good in week 1. Reed Blankenship in Philadelphia. Part of the reason why the Eagles have been so bad against tight ends is because of Blankenship, and then he got hurt. Hopefully he's available week 3 against Tampa Bay. And do I have a linebacker in here? I've been impressed with Dennis Gardeck, but he's more of a rusher and not necessarily a tackle getter among the LBs. Maybe Terrell Bernard qualifies in Buffalo as a linebacker that fantasy managers could go and expect target or tackle volume from. 11 tackles week 1, 6 in week 2 with an interception.
I got one. Zach Cunningham for the Eagles. He's replacing Nakobe Dean. Well, he's a starter anyway, I think, but I think he'll be their leading tackle more. And he didn't have a ton last week, but the Vikings had 9 carries.
Right. He actually had 8 tackles in a game the Vikings barely ran it.
Right. He had 5 solo, but 8 total tackles. So Zach Cunningham actually, I think, is someone I'm going to be looking at. I have some pretty lousy linebackers in our IDP league. Let's talk about guys that don't get a lot of pub on this show, but shallow league guys like the Nico Collins of the world, because I would maybe break my bank for Nico Collins. I'm pretty excited about. I don't know.
The whole receiving core is playing
do that, but yeah, I know it's crazy. We talked about it so much on yesterday's show. Please listen to Beyond the Box Score. But Nico Collins is something like 78% roster.
Yeah.
But would he be the second priority? Let's say Jerome Ford's number 1, no matter what. But all the other people we've talked about today, would Nico Collins be ahead of them?
Yes.
Okay.
He's awesome.
Who else? Jordan Love. Jordan Love probably not this week against the Saints, but Are we buying it basically rest of season?
I mean, look, he scored 6 touchdowns in 2 games without his best receiver.
Right.
So it's a little erratic, with in terms of, the passes that he's missing on, but there are some throws that he's made that his receivers haven't helped him out too. So to do what he did last week, I thought was very impressive because not only did not have Watson, he didn't have Aaron Jones. So you could argue maybe his 2 top pass catchers not being there. So yeah, for sure. You want to, again, going back to whatever your number 2 quarterback situation is, and if you're the Joe Burrow fantasy manager, you might be exploring a trade for Jordan Love was on somebody's bench in a 1 quarterback league. So that's the type of move I think that can help you out long term.
Saints, and then the Lions, the Raiders, a bye, the Broncos, and the Vikings. If the Rams defense isn't what they've been the first 2 weeks of the season, he's got them after that. He's a terrific guy to go and try and get.
Rashawn Johnson, Jalen Warren, these guys are available. Tank Bigsby still available. I mean, they're in like 20 to 25% of leagues.
Bigsby's somebody that might get dropped because he didn't play.
Yeah.
Or he didn't get any touches in week 2. And this could be a situation where if they're playing with the lead, like we saw in week 1, they might lean on him a little bit.
Oh,
and he would be one of those guys. I think if something happened to ETN,
yes, of course,
we'd be talking about him like we've talked about Jerome Ford today.
Yep.
But so if he gets dropped and you've got ETN, maybe make the room for him.
And you may see also, just because of moves that people have to make, Elijah Mitchell may get dropped. He's rostered.
Oh, you have to. Yeah.
And he, to me, is the lottery ticket.
Until he gets hurt, and then it's Jordan Mason.
Don't talk about ETN getting hurt is what I was trying to say earlier. Like, don't even speak that.
Yeah.
I hate the idea of it.
Okay, fine. ETN wins Publishers Clearinghouse and buys his own island in the Pacific.
Last player was Jacoby Myers. He had such a good
that's
week,
a great one too.
75% rostered. And Nico Collins or Jacoby Myers?
Nico, but I'd look for both.
Nico
PPR.
And in the off chance that Devontae Adams is out, then Myers would be better than Nico this week.
Are you seeing Nico Collins snap shares? He's playing 50 to 60% of the snaps. It's the strangest thing. We couldn't find any explanation for it, but very weird.
But this is where snap count becomes a little bit irrelevant. Like when they're on the field, they get like.
But that's weird because he's running fewer routes than Tank Dell and then Robert Woods. He's just the number 3 receiver in terms of involvement. It is really weird, but he's killing it.
Yeah, I don't care.
No, I don't either. Like I said, I mean, I'm super excited, but it is weird. One thing I did care about was Kendrick Bourne, who the Patriots, each of the first 2 weeks have had one wide receiver play basically every snap. And in week 1, it was Bourne. In week 2, it was Devontae Parker. And Bourne played about half the snaps, 50 to 60%.
But still led them in targets, though.
Did he?
Yes.
Okay. Well, but that's still, though. I mean, that's just weird. All right. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we will spend a few minutes on last night's games. There were a couple of games last night, and they were both 1-score games. And then we'll get into more waiver wire players for you, including the deep league guys. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
The Scudetto, where the soul of Italy meets the pinnacle of calcio. Catch Serie A on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount+.
New Orleans 20 and Carolina 17. Any major fantasy takeaways from this, Dave Richard?
Are you starting to get worried about Miles Sanders yet?
A little bit. I want to give him a little bit of passes because of the game, the opponent last night. But, fumbled in week 1, losing passing down work to Chuba Hubbard.
Right. I didn't see, or maybe I did see, how much Chuba played in the fourth quarter.
A lot.
12 of 21 snaps in the fourth quarter when they were trailing.
But they're going to be trailing a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So he might be a sell and get whatever you can. Their schedule coming up at Seattle, Minnesota, Detroit. So it's not that bad of a schedule short term. So I don't know. Maybe he's not a sell high or sell whatever. Maybe you just got to be patient with him. Can't argue with 17 touches. It's just the production's bad. The line's bad. Quarterback's bad. I like the involvement for Thielen. And if they can't run, this is where they go. They're going to go for a short area target like Adam Thielen to rack up catches and less than 10 yards per catch. moving forward. So if Thielen is out there in your leagues, and I think he is in a handful, what's his rostership right now? He's at
42%.
Yeah. He's out there in about half of CBS Sports leagues. I'm not prioritizing him over Burks, Reynolds, not even Tutu Atwell, but he's out there. He's someone that could be fairly effective if you just need a bench wide receiver. And you can probably get him for next to nothing in Fab too.
I haven't looked into this, but I feel like Michael Thomas is a superstar in the first half and then completely
Yes.
right both games.
Yes.
It's like I'm sitting there going, "Oh God, Olave's not going to have a good game." Michael Thomas is going off, and then at the end of the day, Olave's
That catch
just
by Olave was ridiculous.
You want me to look it up?
Nah, that's all right.
I want to look it up.
Miles Sanders, 22 touches in week 1, 17 in week 2. So if you want to believe in it, the one thing he hasn't done yet is broken off a big run, and that's kind of a staple for him. He's an explosive guy. He has a 13-yard carry. That's his longest carry of the season. So that's what's missing so far. If that comes, things could change for him. What?
Guess how many targets Michael Thomas has in the second half of games this year?
2.
Correct.
Weird, right? It's like he sets it up for Olave. All right, Pittsburgh 26.
I think the thing with Sanders is he's going to end up being a trap back. They're not going to score very much, and if he's not catching passes, it could be a problem.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible, and you know that he's got an injury history as well.
The only thing
Would Thomas get more targets if the Saints were in more competitive games in the second half?
I mean, they were a
I think he
competitive
would.
game last night.
competitive.
And in week 1, they were competitive too. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were able to run a decent amount. I bet he gets more than 2 targets in the second half against Green Bay.
No, I was sorry to say this about Sanders, though, is that he does have 7 catches. So he's not the third down back, but he's still getting some catches. So
But are these dump off catches?
who cares? I hope they are.
Yeah, but he's not doing anything with them.
It doesn't matter. He's still getting PPR point.
Yeah, he averaged like 1.1, less than 1.1 yards per catch. Well, I guess more than that. He had 4 yards.
I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that he would have had 13.8 points in week 1 without the fumble. And then last night playing the Saints, which is going to be one of the toughest defenses, I think, across the board, but certainly against the run. So this is a telling week against Seattle, which, a little more suspect against run.
All right, Pittsburgh 26, Cleveland 22. I mean, Pittsburgh scored 2 defensive touchdowns in this game.
Yeah.
They had 1 big play on offense, George Pickens touchdown. There was a cornerback, number 23. Go watch that replay and tell me what he was doing. Trying to it's like it reminded me of me when I used to play tackle football, and I just was afraid to tackle people. And just let Pickens go for this long touchdown.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was a great play. But sloppy game, and Cooper was started in only 20% of leagues, understandably, and he had a big game, 7 catches for 90 yards on the road. Jamie, what's your big fantasy takeaway from this one?
Kenny Pickett's not good. Matt Canada's worse. Offensive line for Pittsburgh is still a problem, but the encouraging thing was the 10 targets to Pickens. So went from a guy you got to be a little concerned about to somebody that certainly should be started in 3 receiver leagues, because at least they're going to give him those chances. There's the chance for the big plays. So other than that, I thought Najee saved himself with the 21-yard run, although it looked like it took him 40 minutes to get from one side of the field to the other.
Oh my gosh.
Jalen Warren looked good, but he's still stuck in this timeshare with that team. So we'll see what happens moving forward. And then the disappointing thing was the lack of production from the other guys. No Freiermuth, no Robinson, no Calvin Austin. So for certainly Freiermuth, but the other two, and if you're hoping for options in deeper leagues, I would move on. I don't think Robinson or Calvin Austin are going to help.
Pickens had the 34.5% target share. That's gorgeous after what happened in week 1 after Deontay Johnson left. I agree with Jamie. You write him out as a wide receiver. Almost a 60-40 split, not quite, between Najee and Warren. Warren played 11 of 14 snaps on 3rd and 4th down. If you have eyeballs that then that Warren looked better than Najee. And now it's going to come down to a coaching decision on whether or not they think Warren can hold up if he's going to take over 60% of the snaps. We'll see. I'm going to keep him on my rosters for at least 1 more week.
Do you think we should drop Njoku or Freiermuth for Hunter Henry?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, you could. And the problem is that now you're giving Freiermuth a shot to help somebody else out in your league. I may hesitate a little bit with Njoku, especially now that Chubb's out. So I'm going to split the difference. Njoku, Henry, Freiermuth.
I would. I think you have to remember that Deshaun Watson did score 22.7 fantasy points in week 1 because he had 45 yards and a touchdown on the ground. But obviously, this guy is struggling at quarterback. He's 99% rostered. I could see him getting dropped. Does have the rushing upside though, but there's not much to say. I mean, he's
It
just.
still was also a desperate Steelers team at home. So
I don't know that excuses it. I mean, he's.
no, I'm not excusing it at all. But I think what you saw in week 1 is probably more of the norm. An erratic passer can still save himself with his legs. He just made some bad throws. That's going to be what you're dealing with at this point. He's certainly not the guy we saw in Houston. He was never going to get that back. And everything that we heard in the preseason is unfolding right before our eyes.
Yeah,
struggles to make easy throws, trying to do too much, trying to be a hero, holds the ball too long. But again, had no practice time with Amari Cooper this week because he was expected to miss the game. So that was a surprise. And I don't think they're doing enough to get the other guys involved. Njoku, Elijah Moore. He took the shot to Donovan Peoples-Jones, should have been an interception. So he is what he is. He's bad.
He threw 9 times at Elijah Moore, so he gave Elijah plenty of chances to do something in the game. The thing that kind of is in the back of my head on Deshaun is the Browns can't say, okay, we're just going to take a lot off his plate now and be more balanced and run the football. There's no guarantee that they'll be great at that without Nick Chubb there. And so it makes me wonder if this team continues to lean into the pass, Watson be damned. And so some matchups coming up that I don't think are terrible. Tennessee, I think, is actually good for him.
Yeah.
Baltimore is better for him than it is for Jerome Ford. I don't know if I'm starting him in either of these matchups. I'm certainly going to drop him in 10-team leagues if I have another quarterback that I feel good about starting.
Okay, let's look at the waiver wire. The rest of the players we need to talk about here. Start with the quarterbacks. Stafford, we already spoke about. How do you feel about Minshew as let's say potentially a 1-week replacement against the Ravens, who so far have been great against the pass, which is a little surprising given the injuries in the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
But they faced C.J. Stroud and Joe Burrow, and so far they're giving up the 6th fewest yards per attempt. Gardner Minshew, where do you think you'll have him ranked this week?
Just inside the top 20. But, again, I hope he's not playing because I'd rather see Anthony Richardson out there. He's a wild card. He's always going to be like that. Last year, huge game in one start in place of Jalen Hurts, and then a mediocre game. And the mediocre game was against a really good defense in Dallas. So averaged 20 points per game in those 2 matchups. So that's what he's capable of. I don't think he has a ceiling higher than that. But I like the way that he can always sort of do something a little crazy, and that crazy can end up being something decent. So not a must-start guy in a 1-quarterback league by any stretch, but in a 2 QB and super flex league, he should be picked up across the board.
I'd
We just don't
rather
know how long the
roster.
concussion may linger for Richardson.
I missed what you said at the end.
We don't know how long the concussion may linger for Richardson. Like I said, I hope we don't see Minshew at all, but who knows?
There's more long-term upside for Howell and Stafford, and probably for Baker Mayfield. So I'd rather go with those guys. To me, he's a 1-week replacement in super flex leagues.
It's so funny. A quarterback going into 2-week stretch facing the Eagles and the Saints, I would have no interest in. And then a bye. That's Baker Mayfield. But the Eagles have been so bad. They are allowing the most fantasy points to quarterbacks. I think Bradbury. I saw on the interwebs that Bradbury is coming back this week, but it wasn't.
He's got a shot.
The most reputable source. But I saw that Sirianni said he'd be back. I'm trying to confirm that. But I don't know about Blankenship, as Dave was talking about earlier. And he also said Avonte Maddox, their slot corner, is probably out for the year. So that's Mayfield. But then he gets the Saints in a bye week. So if you don't plan on starting Mayfield in week 3, I'm not sure it makes sense to pick him up. I don't think you're going to start him in week 4 at the Saints, and you're certainly not going to start him in his bye week. Any interest in Ryan Tannehill, who had a 23-point game in week 2, and now he gets the Browns?
No.
I'd start him over Minshew. Does that sound good?
All right, let's go to the running backs here. You could look to see if Roshan Johnson, Jalen Warren, Elijah Mitchell, Antonio Gibson, and Tank Bigsby are available. Although I wonder with Gibson, is he more of a drop at this point?
No.
I wouldn't want to drop him.
Why not? He does nothing. Nothing. He has what? He has 9 touches in 2 games. But they've won 2 games. Let's see what happens now against Buffalo and Philadelphia in the next 2 weeks. Let's see what happens. They're not going to be able to run out the clock. Because I think Brian Robinson had 5 carries in the first half. Is that what it was? Something like that in week on Sunday. All right, Jerome Ford. How do you guys feel about Jerome Ford? Now pick him up. Zach Moss is number 2. Matt Breida. I brought up Gary Brightwell. If you're desperate, I don't know that anyone's going to look at him. And again, I'm not saying that the same thing is going to happen that happened last year, but in 2 games without Barkley, or 1 game where Barkley played 31% of the snaps, Breida had 7 carries and Brightwell had 16 in those 2 games. Breida had 9 catches and Brightwell had 3. Justice Hill, Tony Jones, Craig Reynolds. I don't know that we need to really. I feel like we covered this. You guys did a good job with that. There are a lot of handcuffs to get. Tajay Spears, Ty Chandler, Sean Tucker, Keontae Ingram.
How about Jaleel McLaughlin? That's a deeper one.
Jaleel Dabaduya?
Sure. Yeah. If Javonte just doesn't turn on the Jets at some point, I think the Broncos could start giving their undrafted rookie, who's got some speed, more work. And they gave him a short yardage touchdown opportunity, and he got it in week 2.
What about Damian Harris? You guys have any interest in him? 50% rostered?
Sure, you can pick him up.
He's 6 points or nothing.
Pretty much. All right, wide receivers. The shallow league guys are Nico Collins, Jacoby Myers. We have not talked about the Chiefs guys. How are you feeling right now, Jamie, about Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore?
I wouldn't mind stashing them. I know I've been sort of all over the place, so I apologize for that. But I think, you saw some signs of life, with Sky Moore, the 70 yards and the touchdown. And then for Kadarius, again, another 5-catch game. He's just not doing much with it. But at some point, there's going to be somebody that emerges from this receiving core. It'd be nice if it was Raji Rice or, anybody, just really at this point. But these are the 2 with the most upside. So if you have a roster spot to play with, I wouldn't mind rostering them. Like, I'd roster them over almost all the receivers that we talked about, aside from the first 2. So it'd be Reynolds, Tutu, and then either the Chiefs guys.
Over Tank Dell?
I'd probably put Tank Dell ahead of them, yeah.
Okay. So if you're looking at players on the waiver wire, the order would be for Jamie, Reynolds, Tutu Atwell, Tank Dell. And by the way, if you can't find Tank Dell, his name is Nathaniel Dell, Texans receiver. And then Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. And then Robert Woods, Jaden Reed. Sorry, I think I'm a day or 2 away from being done with this cough. Robert Woods, Jaden Reed, Adam Thielen, Traylon Burks, who's actually number 1 for Dave. That's more of a long-term play. Marvin Mims. Okay, Zay Jones is still out there, but he's hurt. I was going to bring up Hunter Renfrow, but it looks like Adams and Myers have a good chance to play this week. But let me ask you guys, how legit do you think Reynolds, Atwell, and Nathaniel Tank Dell are, Dave?
Reynolds is going to be legit until week 7. Double checking the schedule. That's when Jamison Williams comes back. Will Williams take Reynolds off the field a lot? Will he take target share away? We aren't sure if that's going to happen, but it's a concern. For now, you start him. I think he's flex worthy, especially in PPR leagues. Atwell, same thing with him, except it's Cooper Kupp. When Cooper Kupp comes back, we've already talked about how we figure that Kupp will be the target leader for the Rams. Nakua will take the targets that Atwell's been getting. And what does that leave for Atwell? Might leave like 5 or 6 targets. You're hoping he has a couple of big splash plays. Dell might have a little bit more staying power in Houston, just because what's Houston doing? They're playing more for the future than trying to win now. They'll tell you that they're trying to win now. They're not winning now.
They better be trying to win now after giving away 2 draft picks.
Right, exactly. Maybe. But they're going to throw a lot, and that's going to be good for Tank Dell, who's got great speed and got a lot of target volume in week 2. Hopefully a sign of things to come.
Okay.
In fact, I would argue that if you're looking long term, you might rather have Dell on your roster than Atwell, and maybe even over Reynolds.
Okay. And tight ends. We've got Sam Laporta in shallower leagues facing the Falcons, who has struggled terribly against tight ends in 2022, bad in week 1, but solid in week 2 against Luke Musgrave. So Sam Laporta is out there, but he has 5 catches in each of his first 2 games. That's pretty cool. Hunter Henry, 61% rostered. Do you think he should be 80+% rostered, Hunter Henry?
Yes.
Yes.
He will be.
Jake Ferguson, who had a touchdown last week and should have had a second touchdown, but Dak overthrew him in the end zone. And so he's just an end zone target so far through 2 games. And I didn't mean he is an end zone target. I didn't mean just. That's the only thing he does. Zach Ertz, I mentioned this on Sunday night, but in 2 games so far, he's been open for a touchdown and open for a huge chunk play. And Josh Dobbs missed him twice. I'm not saying that's the last time that's going to happen, but he's had opportunities. And Taysom Hill, who in non-PPR for week 3 could be someone you want because he had, I think, 9 carries for 75 yards yesterday. So no Jamal Williams. Drop Tyler Higbee, drop Dalton Schultz, drop Gerald Everett. What about Cole Kmet? Any interest in Cole Kmet at the Chiefs?
Do you want 8 PPR fantasy points?
I would hold him for 1 more week.
Okay.
He has 9 PPR points and almost 8 if you use decimals. Week 1 and week 2.
Finish with the drop-o-meter. 0 to 10. Zach Charbonnet.
0.
2.
Now, listen, you drop him for Ford.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
You might drop him for Moss, too.
it's funny. The way to interpret this, it's tough. You know, you say 0, we don't want to drop Zach Charbonnet. There are scenarios where we drop Zach Charbonnet.
All right. That's why he's a 2.
And Antonio Gibson, like you asked before, too.
Right.
Fair.
But this really should be like, how desperate am I to get this guy off my team? And the higher the number means we think he's pretty much trash. Put him on the waiver wire. So we don't feel that way about Charbonnet. How about JSN?
1.
4.
All right, you got the Metcalf injury, so keep that in mind.
That's true.
How about Zay Jones?
Well, we're talking about picking up Zay Jones.
Well, he's in limbo right now. He's had a great game. He's had a terrible game. But he did have a couple of almost touchdowns, I think. He's also injured. So he's in limbo.
No. So that's a guy you can move on from to go and pick up somebody off the waiver wire because you can probably find a receiver like Zay Jones later on this year. So give him a 7.
Would you rather have Zay Jones or Tutu Atwell?
Atwell, but I'm thinking short term with that roster spot.
Dalton Kincaid.
I would drop him for Hunter Henry.
Yeah.
And I would drop him for Ferguson at this point.
I wouldn't drop him for Ferguson. I'm going to put him at a 5 on the dropometer.
Jahan Dotson.
-1.
0.
Samaje Perine.
0.
He's in that 1 to 2 range.
Juju Smith-Schuster.
10.
He's like an 8.
Kendrick Bourne.
7.
Okay. All right, folks. The Jerome Ford show has concluded. Good luck to you. And stay tuned for updates. If they sign Kareem Hunt or something, we'll probably pop on and do an emergency podcast. But we don't think that's going to happen. And I got a lot of stuff to do today, so let's not have that happen. For Dave and Jamie and Thomas, I am Adam. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow with some trade talk here on Fantasy Football Today.